Welcome to the Ismaili Center on this international lecture on multilateral diplomacy and current politically complex and high-risk environment. The Ismaili Center is a house of dialogue, of the quest of knowledge, where people of different backgrounds can meet, discuss in a peaceful and constructive manner. Through the Ismaili Center International Lecture, we seek to begin together important world thinkers to exchange ideas about a critical issue of the day, the broaden intellectual horizon, to foster an appreciation of the pluralism, and to discuss other matters related to understanding of culture and faith. We are honored that this international lecture is hosted in partnership with the Portuguese Diplomatic Institute and yet another initiative implemented under the principles of the Agreement of the International Cooperation between Ismaili Imamate and Portuguese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, signed in 2008. This lecture is also representative of the dialogue and engagement between the Ismaili Imamate with Portugal, which is based in shared values such as the defense of human dignity, the promotion of the pluralism, and the joint work for the improvement of the quality of life of people. This long-standing relation has been materialized in several agreements, including international treaty for the establishment of the seat of the Ismaili Imamate in Portugal. I would like to thank Ambassador Freitas Farage, the director of the Portuguese Diplomatic Institute, who has been developing an outstanding work for many years, and for his constant support for the willingness to partner with the delegation of Ismaili Imamate on several initiatives. It's an honor to have you, Ambassador, with us today at Ismaili Center to introduce our key speaker. On this aspect, I would like to also convey a special word of appreciation to our friend, former Secretary General of the Foreign Office, Ambassador Vasco Valente, who has been provided diplomatic advice to the delegation of Ismaili Imamate in Lisbon. Ambassador Vasco, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for all your support, and for assisting us in organizing this event. A very special word of gratitude to Professor Athar Sultan-Khan, my long-standing friend, who has very graciously accepted to be here today with us. Sorry. Professor Athar Khan has been an outstanding knowledge of international affairs, greatly due to very high-level position he has occupied, including as a Chief of Staff of the former UN High Commissioner for Refugees and current UN General Secretary António Guterres, of whom he is still an advisor. My dear friend Athar Sultan-Khan, your wide experience and deep knowledge gained during a year not only of your study, but also of experience in sensitive area around the world, knowing inside out how, why crises are born. You come at a moment when, once again, dark clouds loom above us. More than ever, we need multilateral disciplinary to play a role to the full, to be assertive and to keep at bay threats and tensions which, by definition, are no longer local but global. We look forward to listen what you have to say to us. On final note, to thank President of the Ismaili Council of Portugal, Rahim Firoz Ali, and Ismaili Center volunteers for their contribution for making this event happen today. Thank you very much and enjoy your conference. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Commander Nazim Ahmad, diplomatic representative of the Ismaili, Professor Athar Sultan-Khan, Ambassador Mendonça Moura, Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm going to start by explaining how I did meet Professor Sultan-Khan more or less 4 years ago. It was at the beginning of January 2016, and I was appointed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs as the head of the task force that would run the campaign for Antonio Guterres' efforts to become the General Secretary of the United Nations. From the start, Guterres explained to us all that for him it would be an absolute red line that we would never ever criticize one of the other contenders, the other people that were running also for Secretary General. And he did imply that we would only reply in case there were factual errors that were put in the press regarding himself. So, we did follow the line. We didn't criticize the others. We did make a very positive campaign. That was his aim. But very quickly, we started reading articles criticizing Guterres' tenure as the UNHCR, as High Commissioners for Refugees. And some of them had gross errors. So we did count on Athar Sultan-Khan, that was still at in Geneva at UNHCR, in order to put out communiques setting the truth. So this was the way I did meet him. I started working with him at that time. Later on, after Guterres was elected and he was chosen by the Security Council on the 5th of October, he was voted formally on the 6th, and he didn't become actually Secretary General until 3 months later. So during this period, the transition period, Athar played an important role as assistant to Antonio Guterres, as already the Secretary General nominee. So this was my background to explain to you how I did meet him. Now I would like to go on to explain to you that, to tell you that Athar Sultan-Khan was born in Brussels. His father was a Pakistani diplomat. He did go through secondary school in Switzerland. He switched to New York, and he followed courses at Columbia University, where he graduated. And when he was finished with his university studies and his degrees, he entered the UN. And during the coming 20 years, Athar was posted by UNHCR in very tough assignments in Asia and in Africa, and later on he became also chief of cabinet of 3 different High Commissioners for Refugees, and he did work 10 years with Antonio Guterres as his chef de cabinet. Nowadays, he teaches at the Geneva Diplomatic Academy. He teaches international relations, and we are going to listen to him speaking about multilateral diplomacy in the present high-risk environment. So I'll give him the floor for him to make his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Secretary General of the Portuguese Foreign Office, Ambassador Menduque Almeida, if I pronounce it well, Director of the Portuguese Diplomatic Institute, Ambassador Jose, my personal friend, as you said, that as he described how we met each other, and one anecdote I just add that the moment the Russian ambassador called Mr. Guterres that he was going to be recommended to the General Assembly as the next Secretary General, I was so happy. So I called him. It was a hand phone, and I was surprised that Jose answered. And he said, "Athar," he said, "I cannot give you the phone. He is talking to the Russian ambassador right now, getting the, So I remember that in my mind very much. Thank you for reminding the audience of our personal friendship. Honorable Nazim Ahmad, representative of the Ismaili Amanat, I know him very well for various reasons, because there is a refugee element there also, because Nazim's family came from then British India, I think, early days to Mozambique. He was born in Mozambique, and after the War of Independence, he was left in between which nationality he should obtain, and he couldn't get the Mozambican. The Portuguese were withdrawing. So which nationality he ended up getting? Pakistan. He got and he had nothing to do with Pakistan. The fact that he came from there, he came from Gujarat, which was not even a region which was in Pakistan, but he got the Pakistani nationality. He came here as a young man, and we see him now running the entire setup here. Excellencies, ambassadors, members of the diplomatic corps and civil society, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this is not a beautiful speech or a perfect speech written by UN speechwriters. This is only an attempt from my side to make a case in point how we can do better with diplomacy in today's world, which I will explain to you. Our working environment today remains challenging, with 70.8 million forcibly displaced persons, nearly 1 every 2 seconds as a result of conflict and persecution worldwide, as reported by UNHCR 20 June this year on the World Refugee Day. These are the highest unprecedented numbers since Second World War in our history, in our 70 years of history. This figure includes 26 million refugees, including 5.5 million Palestinians, 41.5 million IDPs, and 3.5 million asylum seekers. Some 75% of these are from the OIC region, Organization of Islamic Countries. Vast majorities are women and children in vulnerable situations. About 40% of the refugees live in traditional camps. 60% live in urban areas. Cities are becoming today's modern camps. About 80% of the overall refugee population is living in the developing country, what we call the global south, and not in the industrialized countries as it is sometimes perceived. Under UNHCR's mandate, stateless people number about 8 million, but the figures are significantly higher because we never have the accurate figure, but it's estimated to be 8 million. In addition, the migrant numbers more than 260 million people around the world, representing 3.4% or 1 in every 30 inhabitants of the global population. The world is at a critical moment on several fronts. Climate emergencies is a direct threat in itself and a multiplier of many threats ranging from poverty to conflict, resulting in people on the move. The world is at war. Most of the people flee from one of the multiple conflicts that are being fought across the globe, old ones like Afghanistan and Iraq that never die, and new wars like Syria and Yemen that seems to have no winners but only losers. They are conventional, non-conventional wars, proxy wars, and conflicts with roots in many factors, from inequality to bad governance and struggle over limited resources. Tensions are rising everywhere, and threats of more wars are surrounding us as we speak today. Absence of honest diplomacy has also contributed to keeping so many of these fires burning for so long and forced so many people to remain in exile for years on end. I strongly believe that if conflicts are prevented or resolved, most of the refugee flows will slowly disappear. There is now more than ever before a greater need for global solidarity from the international community for the plight of refugees and for a strong political will that would lead to durable solution to their cause. The war agenda is on the rise again in recent times, and there is lack of capacity in the international community to prevent and to resolve conflicts. We saw this recently at the G20 in France that focused mainly on global trade, climate change, climate crisis, economic ventures, and provided, in my opinion, less priority to the outstanding political differences and addressing peace and security. While the UN General Assembly last month took full advantage of the gatherings of the world leaders to advance the diplomacy for peace, I believe that it made also less impact on conflict preventions and resolutions. The war industry is a big business supported by major powers. Wars, in fact, are being manufactured to sustain the weapon industry at the cost and destruction of human lives. Conflicts are fought in urban areas to deliberately target civilians rather than avoid damaging cities and villages and ensuring their protection as called for by international law. We need to move away from a culture of fear that the world has created and marketing to a culture of trust. Wars will never resolve today's political problems. This is not the way to go. Article 51 of the UN Charter, Geneva Convention and protocols relating to the use of force in self-defense should only be exercised by states in extreme cases and with the involvement of the UN Security Council. This is not the case today. In fact, regime change is not the answer either. That's the easy way out, as some members believe. There has to be respect to the democratic processes and to the results, not what we have seen in recent years in the Middle East and North Africa. During the Cold War era, as you know, I was a student during the Cold War. You can see my gray hairs. During the Cold War era, ideological differences were there, but there was more discrete context, dialogues, and fixed rules of engagement between states that manage and diffuse wars. You were all ambassadors then in Mozambique and other countries. Not only to manage and diffuse wars, resolve conflicts, and find political solutions that enable millions of people to return home in safety, in dignity, and security. Today, this is not the case, also due to the lack of global leadership, perhaps, and real diplomacy by dialogue, a concept that I will elaborate in 5 minutes of period. The war agenda is being used by the international community with a hope or a pretext to build peace rather than building peace through diplomatic dialogue, and I quote from the Charters, saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which is the fundamental principle that are called for in the Charter of the United Nations and the values over 74 years ago in 1945. As Dag Hammarskjöld have said, and you know this quote very well, the UN was created not to lead mankind to heaven, but to save humanity from hell. War will never be a means of building peace. UNHCR, upon its creation 5 years after the UN in 1950, received a very well-defined mandate and statute under the UN General Assembly resolution of 1950. No other UN organization has ever received the same type of mandate or statute since then. UNHCR, as you know, is the individual, and as the colleagues have said, I served as chef de cabinet to 3 consecutive High Commissioner, including Antonio Guterres for over a decade. The High Commissioner is the only other person than the Secretary General elected by the General Assembly, reports to the General Assembly, is not supervised by the Secretary General, and his executive committee is not a governing board but only an advisory board upon his request. And the UNHCR representative around the world, which many of you work with, and this is covered in several countries, as Nazim have said, so the Ismaili Amamat representative can hear it. The UNHCR representative report directly to the High Commissioner on the mandate responsibilities, but they work, of course, in close coordination with the UN country team and every other aspect of the UN work. Now, for all of us working in the field, they are humanitarian workers. They are representing the UN in these war zones and politically complex and strategic locations. There are 2 issues that remain still particularly challenging and case in point for the need for more multilateral diplomacy. The first problem is the blurring between the humanitarian, civilian, military, and political actions in these conflicts that has resulted in what I call the shrinking of the humanitarian space. This is essentially respect for humanitarian principles of humanity, neutrality, objectivity, impartiality that gives us space to do our work and negotiate with all parties to the conflict. This also gives us access to the people that we're trying to help, and security, and also avoid becoming a target. So this is what we call the humanitarian space, and which is now shrinking. This is particularly the case in the crescent of crisis, as I call, if you look at the world map, starting from Central Southwest Asia, the Middle East, Horn of Africa, going towards the Sahara region, and produces the overwhelming majority of refugees and displaced people that I just mentioned to you a few minutes ago. The results are huge risk to vulnerable civilians and humanitarian workers who are trying to have access to assist them. In addition, many states that used to be happy for humanitarian organization to come are increasingly using sovereignty arguments to block them from accessing to the beneficiaries. And many donor countries have now also started earmarking funds for selected beneficiaries in selected conflicts according to their own foreign policy objectives. The second problem that I see in many parts of the developed world, where we are speaking from here in Western Europe, one could say we see the shrinking of the human compassion space. The asylum system is being eroded as sentiments for xenophobia and anti-immigrant political parties gaining ground and election across Europe and other parts of the world. Race wars are being created by extremists and popular movements. Migrant refugees and asylum seekers are being weaponized for political gains. As the Secretary General have said, polarization is on the rise and popularism is on the march. People forced to flee are finding it increasingly difficult to access international protection, as many countries are shutting their doors and borders and hearts closing to those seeking asylum. This is a stark contrast with the different realities and with the fact that the fundamental principle of refugee protection are deeply enshrined in all major religions and civilization, and the generosity of the large refugee hosting countries that continue to be evident, particularly across the global south. There is a systematic violation of state and non-state actors of international humanitarian, international human rights law, and disregard of the letter and spirit of the UN Charter. There is no humanitarian solution to humanitarian crisis, the solution is always political. This is the political complex and high-risk environment where we are working today. Ladies and gentlemen, the diplomacy is in danger. This is my point of view. During the last decades, or as I say, since September 11, 2001, diplomacy, which is an important tool in our work with governments, has taken a dive. The sense of dialogue and negotiation implied by the word's Greek roots seems to have lost its place in international relation to a culture of instructions and ultimatums. So just imagine, instead of like dialogue and negotiation, is instructions and ultimatums, you see. This we see today is not working. We are moving out of a well-defined multilateral governing system, a multilateral decision-making, to a bilateral system and bilateral decision-making. The gaps between the different regional and political perspectives have widened as all sides perceive the other negatively and lacks confidence and trust to start a real dialogue. This has resulted in a world where interlocutors often prefer to work apart or within selected groups rather than collectively addressing peace and security as called for by the UN Charter. We need to understand and respect the differences and narrow them rather than widening them. And this is how I see it. The world is facing a crisis of confidence and losing trust in governments. More than ever, multilateralism and international cooperation is under fire. Hate speech is on the rise, threatening peace, social stability, and democratic values. We need to remember that lack of multilateral institution in Europe 100 years ago resulted in the two world wars. More than wars, there is a need today more than ever for global response to global challenges. No country can resolve them alone. We see a lot of addressing symptoms without addressing root causes. We need a network of multilateralism and international cooperation with the UN in its center, an international system that is fully able to respond to global problems, including global terrorism, of course, international criminality, and global solutions. The Secretary General said at the last General Assembly to reinvigorate multilateralism and strengthen the multilateral system. At the beginning of his mandate, we spoke about it recently when we were together in New York, Mr. Guterres already called for a surge in diplomacy for peace and declared the reform of the UN work on peace and security one of his top priorities. He reiterated this again and often said that he will not sit back and watch an assault on multilateralism just when it is most needed in the world today. But people still believe strongly in the UN. The world is splitting in two separate competing zones, and in this divided world, we need a strong UN and led by a strong Secretary General and Antonio Guterres, as I see him. Diplomatic dialogues, negotiations, mediations, and consultation with all parties to the conflicts are the only answer to resolve and prevent conflicts and pave the way to political solution and sustainable peace that would enable forcibly displaced people to return home to the places of origin and safety and dignity. There is a need for honest, even-handed diplomacy by envoys with full plenipotentiary powers, working quietly as a preventive measure or publicly in shuttle diplomacy, adjusting negotiation and consultation strategies along the way. Such diplomatic dialogues could also lead to truth and reconciliation efforts that in some conflicts, I believe, like in Afghanistan, in my neighboring country, never took place till today. More has to be done by the 193 UN member states to strengthen the use of diplomatic options to prevent and resolve conflicts, by settling the dispute through dialogue and consultations, and by using the diplomatic weight with the support of the UN in the theater of diplomacy rather than the theater of war. The 2016 New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants and 2018 Global Compact is a milestone in multilateral cooperation and political commitment at the highest level, and a proof of multi-diplomacy at its best. Ladies and gentlemen, to achieve our diplomatic endeavors in our interaction with governments and counterparts, there is a need for better political judgment, which, based on the lessons of history and on understanding of importance of perceptions, could introduce truly game-changing proposals for peace. One of the lessons the past has taught us is that diplomacy takes time, but it shows the best results. Ethiopia just won the Nobel Peace Prize. Congratulations to the Ethiopian Prime Minister, to Ethiopia, to Africa, I must say. And this itself, it's a proof that diplomacy can deliver. Diplomacy can lead to peace, reconciliation, and a way forward. And this is what I'm trying to make a case for and to all of you this evening. With wars, governments can only attempt to defeat violent extremist groups, but with multilateral diplomacy, they can wipe the extremist ideologies. Diplomacy is no longer an activity solely undertaken by certain countries elegantly, eloquently discussing main issues, international relations at cocktail parties and receptions such as we're doing here. We have to be physically present in the deep field and must deal with all interlocutors in stronger and weaker nations, state and non-state agents, allies and rivals, conventional, non-conventional actors, even if the UN Security Council has declared some of them as terrorist group. This is very important that I should underline. It is necessary under our mandate that we deal with all de facto parties to the conflict in order to obtain full access to the beneficiaries and space for us to deliver our mandate responsibilities. Sometime in my work, I have seen myself, I cannot just deal with the conventional government when the country is split and the non-state agents are controlling where the people are. I can't say, look, I am very much the UN and I can only deal with it. I have to deal with you guys. So that's what I'm saying, that one has to deal with all parties to the conflict. We need to deal with all parties to the conflict, avoiding intellectual and cultural arrogance. It's a very important point. Without taking a political position and under the same diplomatic protocol and equal level and courtesy and recognition. We need to respond in ways that are truly culturally sensitive and understanding the wide spectrum of political and regional perspective that shape our world. While we see acts of terrorism as criminal and unjustifiable, there's no question about that, regardless of their motivation, acts of wars are also seen from another perspective as acts of terrorism and criminal and unjustifiable. Human rights and the war of terrorism can also be seen by some on the other side as a contradiction in terms. This is what I call real diplomacy by dialogue, a concept that I have developed at the Geneva School of Diplomacy and introduced in my diplomatic protocol handbook at UNHCR and at the UN Staff College in Torino, where I am working with the senior UN envoys so that they understand this concept very well. And we have signed an MOU with them recently. At the Ludwig Maximilian University in München earlier this year, I called this concept humanitarian diplomacy, basically to persuade decision makers and opinion leaders to act at all time in the interest of the vulnerable people with full respect to the fundamental humanitarian principles. In fulfilling our mandate responsibilities of international protection and durable solution for forcibly displaced people, advocacy, information sharing, confidence building are important that need to be conducted in a diplomatic manner with governments. This is done by ensuring a certain style of communication, both written and verbal, to respect host cultures, sensitivities, and traditions, and once again, understanding the perceptions. I cannot underline that more because I see this a lot in certain part of the world, this part of the world, people think we know it all because I went to Colombia, I read everything, I listened to CNN, I read all that, I know it everything. You land in Kabul or in Kandahar or in Kenya, you know, you have to understand both sides. It is very important. As UNHCR was created in Geneva, and I lived in Geneva from the age of 12 and did my schooling, as Jose just said, the discreet Swiss Calvinistic style of working in quiet diplomacy has influenced positively our style as we see in our past history and practice. I will not run to the press immediately if CNN is outside, say, oh, we had a great discussion with the civil society in Lisbon, we resolved all the problems, I built on my own website or on my own page. That's nonsense. You have to work. If you have something to say, you go to the press. You don't rush to the press to build your own profile. Understanding all international convention, treaties, and protocol, including the UNHCR mandate, UN Charter, Geneva Conventions, international humanitarian human rights laws and doctrine, and also historical and political perspective, provides all of us credibility and respect when dealing with interlocutors. Because sometimes while on paper our counterparts are the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, when I was working in Sudan and Somalia and Malaysia and elsewhere, but or the Ministry of Interior or the Refugee Office in the Foreign Ministry, in reality in the theater of operation, often these are the police, the military, the militia groups, paramilitary groups or security forces who sometimes don't fully understand the UN role. I was told that, look, this is the resolution Security Council have adopted, sanctioned in this country, and you are responsible. I said, no, I'm not responsible. So in the end, I was cornered by so much by in one country. I said, look, all we do in the Security Council is provide the microphone and translation. It's the member states who do these things. So sometimes people don't understand even these things. So one has to explain these things very well. I believe strongly that our image and our emblem, style of working and interaction are better protection at times than barbed wires and concrete walls. I'm reaching the end of my statement, so I'm good in time. If we rank countries geopolitically, of course, USA, China, Russia, blah, blah, all these countries are the big powers, everybody will say. But I believe that the media is a powerful fourth power. I see it because of the strong power and influence. Of course, fake news is obviously not so helpful to us. I see sometimes UNHCR's and UN public statements are more effective than media reports or even Security Council resolutions. Sometimes don't say much. Toxic language in political and social media have resulted in xenophobia and killings of refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers. Language should therefore ensure political and cultural sensitivities. Derogatory word descriptives like jihadist, Islamist, Islamic fundamentalists, or referring to extremist groups by name should be avoided as not to give them recognition. I mean, why do we have to hashtag Boko Haram, like CNN saying, Boko Haram spokesman talk to us. I mean, why give them so much importance? These groups have nothing to do with Islam. Islam has never, in fact, no religion preaches extremism. And so why give recognition to these groups? We never, and in the UN, we never talk about these groups by names. We can call them extremist groups, but not by name. And so also, jihadists. I mean, many of us are from. Many of you are Arab speakers here. I know from Afghanistan and Pakistan, if you engage in jihad, you call mujahid singular, mujahideen plural. Jihadist is an anglicized term. There's no such thing as jihadist, and there's no such thing as Islamist either. And these becomes like degrading to Muslim people. And so if one is going to go to that part of the world that I explained to you, 70% of the people are from the OIC countries, with that background, you start with the wrong foot already. And then, so one has to be very, very sensitive about it. Otherwise, you're not going to, you can go there, they will give you all the hospitalities, one buffet after another, and you say goodbye, you go back home, but you haven't achieved anything, you see. So one has to understand these things very well. Media can play a positive role in creating humanizing connections in a polarized world and counter the message of hate with the message of peace. So of course, media can be a very strong partner, is a strong partner for us. We work very closely with media, but like I said, one has to be very, very careful not to use some of these terms which are very negative for certain part of the world. Now, just one word on cyber diplomacy, because that's one of the issue came to my attention just about a week ago by one of the governments in the Middle East. So I wanted to just say one word on it. Cyber diplomacy is an evolution of public diplomacy to use new tools of digital communication. That is correct. Diplomacy, I see, is changing in terms of its practice with the progressive adoption of new technologies and changing role in digital age. I think slowly we will be moving from our traditional diplomatic dialogues, note verbal, which we are very much used to write, ciphertelexes that we used to, coded ciphertelexes that we used to send, and diplomatic bag that we used to receive. Slowly these things might all become, done electronically. So diplomatic bag is coming through the website or whatever. And but the absence of personal context and consultation could be detrimental to the broader international diplomatic order, I believe. The challenge for me, therefore, is how to apply these new practices and tools in diplomacy, and how to ensure, to secure them, to ensure that information is not prematurely leaked when diplomatic discussions are underway. I believe a secure hybrid model, cyber diplomacy and traditional diplomacy could be more suitable, as long as we don't lose sight of the political realities on the ground. All of us are in fact kind of news broadcasters and e-diplomats with our smartphones and social media. We need to be responsible. While we can be the best advocate to the cause, we have obligations and we need to ensure accountability as well. In any given conflict, the return of people is imperative. To fully understand what I am saying, I know many of you know it, but those who are listening from other parts of the world and the young professionals and scholars here, to better understand the legal framework of the forcibly displaced people and the plight, key reading material one should take note, obviously the 51 Refugee Convention and the 67 Protocol, but also the 1969 OAU Convention on Refugees, the 1984 Cartagena Declaration, the 1993 UNHCR Agenda for Protection, the 2009 Uganda Convention on IDPs, and the 2016 and 2017 New York Declaration and Compact on Refugee and Migrants. A global refugee forum will be convened in Geneva later on this year in December, opened by the Secretary General. So those of you who are interested in this topic can be mindful of that. The best way, I believe, again, this is for those who are listening from also outside, to pursue a career with the UN or prepare for even for a assignment or emergency deployment to the field, is to understand the history and the political situation in the respective region. You will be so surprised that the top-notch envoys which are sent sometime do not know that. If they know it, they only know one side of it. And they think they know it all. And they go there, or some of them have no time, so they're reading the briefing book on the plane as they are going, because they have no footprint on where they have been sent. So it's very important to understand the history, the political situation in a respective region. Because when you meet your interlocutors, if you talk about politics and history, something that you share together with them, there's a good niche to build up relationship, Rather than getting to the point. I did many other things. When I was in Africa, I use football as an icebreaker often because Cameroon and Congo, they like football. So I say, oh, Monsieur le Ministre, vous aimez le football, demain votre équipe va jouer. Then I talked about football. Oh oui, Sultan-Khan, bien sûr, merci, merci. Votre femme en allemand, les Allemands vont gagner. You know, it opens up a very nice thing. Or I use music a lot in some parts of the world because you can't get to the point very quickly. I've had delegation for the Security Council, which I took to the field. Some ambassadors from certain countries, I don't need to name, from Western countries, they came and to the meeting, and the ambassador took his watch out and he said, look, we have 40 minutes in our hands, ministers, and let's get to the business. Then the minister called me, he said, Ya Akhi Sultan-Khan, wallahi, what is this? Come out, please. So I went out and he said, what is this? We are waiting for 40 years. Hey, they come and they say they have 40 minutes. So I called the ambassador. I said, why 40? He said, yes, but the UN says the plane cannot stop because there's no generator. I said, ambassador, forget about it. I will start the plane myself. Please give these people time. They're waiting for you. Don't get to the point. Listen to them. Talk to them. And because in our part of the world, where unfortunately the problems are, so one has to understand it, we need time. People need time to understand each other and have a dialogue. So it's very important to do that. Don't rush out to the capital, from the capital to the field or the conflict zone or the camps without informing and clearing with the host country. Often people say, hey, I have no time. I just arrived in Nairobi. I'm going to Dadaab. Then you end up with Dadaab and they say, who the hell are you? You can't do, one has to do these things very, very formally. And upon arrival at the border area, be it wherever the conflicts are, you have to inform the local authorities, very, very important. One cannot say that, look, I just met with the president and the prime minister and the foreign minister, why should I go to the prefect and present myself? You have to. The refugees are living in a zone. Give him recognition. And he will work with you, he or she closely with you. So that is very, very important. Always try to keep a diplomatic style of dialogue and mannerism that shows respect and courtesy. Understand the diplomatic hospitality code of conduct according to the local cultures, sensitivities, and traditions. So I'm reaching the end of my points. I hope sincerely that understanding some of the elements that I've introduced in the real diplomacy by dialogue will enable you to better discuss and advocate on behalf of these forcibly displaced people around the world. This would also enable you to better understand the plight of the people on the move to better protect and assist them, be it in Portugal, be it in Western Europe, be it elsewhere, and have full and unfettered access to them in the developing countries in the south, and work together with the host countries towards a durable solution to the cause. Thank you very much for inviting me, both of you, and to all of you. And I will be very happy to even receive messages or contacts with any one of you later on, in case you want me to clarify or you wish to correct me for what I have said. I'm always ready to learn more, and you will be able to get my email from Nazim Jan. He can give it to you. I conclude with a quote from the Secretary General. Since I worked with him, I can quote him. He knows that I have the liberty. So, as the Secretary General have said, problems we face today are real, but so is hope. Let us restore trust, rebuild hope, and move ahead together. So I finish with that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for those inspiring remarks, particularly the need to engage with people, with all people, and connect with them. I would take this opportunity, if it is okay to open the floor to some questions. So anyone wants to take the first question, which is always a very sensitive moment? Yes?
I just take my pen.
Madam Ambassador, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Professor, for such a thorough review of those many issues. I noted early on in your talk that you mentioned that resolving conflicts would help stem the flow of global refugees. And in the spirit of the quote that you provided from the Secretary General, we should absolutely hope that that is true. But I personally am concerned about the climate emergency that we face and the potential for a whole new wave of refugees. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of the role of multilateralism in helping stem those climate refugees, because we've seen recently, for example, that the Council of Europe has said that adding climate refugees into the Geneva Convention would open up a Pandora's box. So what should we do multilaterally to stem what could be a horrific problem as soon as possible? Thank you.
Any other questions so that they could be responded in group? Yes, so please.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for your kind words. And the way I see it is, of course, climate change and climate emergencies and its effect on the displacement of people. And you're absolutely right. I see it together with the flow of refugees, because often, if you look at some of the conflicts, like in the Sudan, the Darfur crisis basically started because of the scarcity of water. And I think that the UNHCR has a clear position that those people who are obliged to flee as a group because of the situation in the places of origin would need to be factored in, and they would probably will not qualify under the 51 Convention, because there's no individual persecution, but certainly the High Commissioner of Refugees and the mandate given to him by the international community would take that into account. I think that the European Council you mentioned, I don't know their position right now, but I know that they are very sensitive to that, because UNHCR has been engaging from the very beginning on climate change and displacement. And the forum that I mentioned to you, which the Secretary General will be opening in December, it's going to be attended by very high level. I was told already, I cannot mention all the heads of states who are coming here, because heads of state in the last minute might change their mind. But there are quite a few countries are representing themselves at the head of state level, giving importance to this whole issue of displacement of people by conflict, and also by conflict induced by climate emergencies. Yeah, Rahim? Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Yes, madam. Maybe you could take some questions too.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your speech. My name is Rahila. I'm originally from Tajikistan, but I finished MGIMO, Moscow State University of International Relations in Moscow, and master degree also. And you mentioned in your speech that for you, you said that diplomacy is in danger. And while studying diplomacy and international relations, I myself personally came to the conclusion that diplomacy is dead. So diplomacy, you come to diplomacy, and you can use the diplomacy only when your government and your state will allow you to do so. And as you mentioned yourself, that today, unfortunately, having wars and conflict zone in the world became a profitable business. So, and mainly it's by the superpowers, by the leading countries, the countries that are supposed to be the example for the other countries and that are supposed to help other developing countries and developing world to reach some level or some wealth, some level of stability, are right now choose conflicts and proxy wars and many other types of conflicts as a business. So my question is, are we going to find solution for it, and are we realizing what is going to happen, or we need this third world war, or another big conflict, worldwide conflict, because United Nations, was established after the Second World War II, and people understood that we need a multilateral way of handling our problems. So today, many experts, many people say that UN needs reforms, and do you agree with that? And what's your opinion on that? Do we really need something big and dangerous that will almost destroy our planet, or we are already aware of what's going on and will find any solution? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know whether, Ambassador, you want to respond to this one, or okay, I can. You see, the point is that indeed, one thing we have to keep in mind, that after the creation, the League of Nations was dissolved, and we had the Second World War. But after the creation of the UN in 1945, we have not had a Third World War, as you put it. So there is something that we can be pleased about. But however, there are conflicts and wars as we are talking right now, and I think I fully agree with you that war is not the way to go forward, to try to pretend that through war and defeat of the so-called enemy, we would be able to bring peace. Because often, as an international community, we fight the wrong enemy. In some of the Middle East countries, I'm not going to quote them now, but I believe strongly that we're not fighting the right enemy. We are fighting enemies according to what we like, according to our own foreign policy objectives and according to our own economic and other objectives, you see. So I think that diplomacy, I believe strongly, needs to continue. And we have lots of successful stories in the UN. You as a young scholar and others would know it. I lived through it. After a massive diplomatic effort by incredible diplomatic envoys of the UN, we returned the Mozambican refugees home. You guys were there. Angola, Southwest Africa, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos. You know, we have Dayton Accord and the Balkan region. Okay, Dayton Accord, there's few. Bosnians still could not go back, but nevertheless, there's a residual caseload always everywhere. But so, you know, we have some very, very good success stories where diplomacy prevailed, you see. So I think diplomacy, because what is diplomacy, as I explained to you? I think the Greek ambassador was here, right? Okay, I don't know who speaks Greek here. Diplomacy is a Greek word, consultations and mediations. I think diplomacy is an art of how to engage with people. That's what it is. And the case in point I'm trying to make here is that we need to do more with diplomacy. We already engage with it, but a certain style of diplomacy, because sometimes we overlook the sensitivities of the other side that we are trying to resolve, because we need to know both sides. As I say, you can't clap with one hand, you can't do the tango alone, you need a partner. You need to know both sides, and this is the most important. That's why I'm a strong believer in multilateral diplomacy, and this is the only way I believe we can diffuse, as you said, a very, very serious situation in this world. If there are any other questions, I would be very happy to answer. We have time. There's never the right question, I can tell you, and so you could ask anything you want. and I can give a quick response and not go into a longer. Madam, and then sir, yeah. And then there was one in the back too. Yes, so go ahead, madam.
Thank you. As a young head, I agree with you the need of honestly and open diplomacy. But I would ask you, how can we avoid secret diplomatic games? Because we all know that there are some interests behind this big objective, this big aim that is world peace. So how can we avoid it?
You mean to say how to be discreet in what we're doing? You mean to say
Totally open, I think.
how to be transparent and what we...
Yes.
Yeah. I think how I have been trained in the UN system, I joined the UN 20 days before my 24th birthday. So I have done the whole life the same thing. And I've been trained in a way that you cannot hide anything, because whatever you put on paper, whatever you say, everybody will know it. So I have always been very mindful when I put things on paper that both sides of the conflict will get to see it. So in diplomacy, it's important and that's where the art of diplomacy in terms of, and the French language is wonderful because you can say so many things without saying anything, you see. So English is more direct, you know, and so that's why I think sometimes one can get away with not saying much but saying something. But I fully agree with you. What is the more serious problem for me is that when negotiations are going on, that information is leaked, and that distorts everything that we're doing, you see. And that is a very, very serious. And sometimes, people are bugging telephones and system. I mean, if you see on the website, it says the Chief of Staff of UNHCR, Netanyahu, President Hollande, and Angela Merkel, telephones are bugged by one superpower. So when this came to my attention, I asked the UN to find out, and I said to my counterparts, I said, look, if you want to know something, I can tell you, you don't need to bug my phone. So I think that this is my worry sometimes, that things become prematurely leaked, you see. This is more so my worry. There was a question here, I think. Yes, sir. And then one in the back, I think.
Thank you very much, Professor, and thank you for the Ismaili Center for this very interesting event. I am the ambassador of Iraq. As you know, Iraq is very involved in this file, and with Syria, I think we had more than 16 million refugees and IDPs. Do you think the current Turkish intervention can be successful to bring back the refugees from Turkey to Syria? It is feasible, or and what the United Nations can do, because we are waiting for a lot of refugees from this intervention from both sides of the border. Thank you.
Yeah, you see, the main concern, of course, for UNHCR always is that, first of all, there should be access to the refugees, and there should be a humanitarian corridor, that if there's a conflict going on, that the refugees should come to safety. And wherever they come to safety, they should be able to be provided with international protection as called for under the 1951 Convention and the 67 Protocol, or any other conventions. Iran is one of the largest refugee hosting country we have in the world today, together with Pakistan hosting the Afghan refugees for decades without any difficulties, and burden sharing with the international community from the very beginning. So I'd like to, Ambassador, thank very much your country for your hospitality to the Afghan refugees. And since then, there have been many other refugees which you have, which has come to your country. I think that if there would be normally, as I said, in any conflict, there should be an access, first of all, to the refugees, and then if they, from a voluntary point of view, they would like to then leave and go out to another country, there should be a humanitarian corridor for them to do so, and then we would like very much that country to provide them with asylum as well. There is.
Hi, thank you very much for your speech, very enlightening. My question is about negotiating with terrorists. So, given the fact that you said that we should negotiate with all parties, and but not publicize them, then should states negotiate? Should states negotiate with terrorists? You know, how do you deal with that?
Sure.
That dilemma, that morality? Because if you negotiate with terrorists, then on one hand you kind of give credibility to the terrorists and not to the state, and then it's a very problematic.
Sure.
I think. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you see, this is where the point I made about perceptions come, you know, because, you know, there are some parties which are quote-unquote terrorists, as we all see it, all of us here, and they are not seen as terrorists from the other side, you know. So it is, that's why I say that one has to deal with all parties to the conflict, because sometimes they are political parties or political wings or non-conventional or non-state agents which are perceived as being terrorists from certain part of the world are not perceived to be terrorists from the other part of the world. So what do you do as the international community or the United Nations or others? My answer is that you should deal with all parties with the same objectivity and with the same in an impartial way. I could have my personal views about a certain party, but in my work I had to deal with many groups. I have been saying, I can say one thing very clearly, I've been saying to whoever dealt with Afghanistan that they have to deal with the Taliban. It's a political entity in that country. 65% of the people in Afghanistan are Pashtun people. You have to deal with the Taliban, you know, and that's one example that people say, oh, Taliban have done this. I mean, look, Taliban, you know, you have to deal. If you can't deal with the Taliban, you can't resolve the problem of Afghanistan. Similarly, in other countries, it's the same dilemma, and that's why I think rather than labeling groups so quickly, one should step back and look at the history and politics, why these groups are, what they are, what are their origins, fully understand both sides, go out there and then try to make a decision and go forward then. But the answer is that one has to deal with all sides. There's no way out of that, you see. There was another question in here, if I'm not mistaken, in the back. Yeah, yes, sorry, Ambassador Saad Safir.
Thank you, Professor Sultana. My name is Javed Khatak. I'm the ambassador of Pakistan, and thank you for mentioning the refugees that we've been hosting for decades. My question to you is about the multilateralism or bilateralism or diplomacy for that matter. I was wondering, what do we do with the UN resolutions which are there? I mean, on the UN Security Council resolutions, but they're not implemented. I mean, we have 11 Security Council resolutions on Kashmir, but they're there since 1948. Nothing has happened. So how do we implement decisions which are taken by multilateral bodies? If you can please comment on that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Saad Safir. Yeah, it is a question that's been asked often about many of the UN resolutions which are left unimplemented. Western Sahara is another situation I dealt with in most of my career as coordinator for Western Sahara, and there is the same situation, and there are other parts of the world. I think the resolutions are issued by the Security Council, and the UN is there, of course, to advise, and the UN is there to ensure a fruitful dialogue between member states, the friends of the resolution when the resolutions are being written and everything. I fully agree with you. For the credibility of the international community and for the Security Council, in fact, resolutions should be implemented. I fully agree with you. I don't have the answer to you. What should we do as international community? I think all we can do is to advocate. As has happened in the General Assembly, I think many heads of state have spoken about many of the resolutions which have left unimplemented, and the people who continue to be under a terrible situation with the lack of human rights. And you name one situation, and the Palestinian is a quite a known situation as well, you see. And I think I think we have to continue with this advocacy and try to influence through other member states in the Security Council that these resolutions are finally implemented. Any last question? Yeah, Madam.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the enlightening presentation. I'm the ambassador of South Africa. I've picked up the populism, rise of populism and political arrogance. Now, with the rise of populism and the political arrogance, how do we begin to navigate and negotiate in these treacherous waters to reach or attain a stable and balanced society?
Yeah, you see, the xenophobia and populism, of course, these are very, very serious concerns that we have in Europe itself as we are speaking, and I think that it becomes very difficult. I agree with you. With my experience is that if there are any misunderstandings that there's like we call Islamophobia in certain parts of the world, because people do not understand the Islamic religion or the message of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and they try to be very negative about the Muslims. And what I did is that I did advocacy at all levels, you see. And because if you go to the popular leader, he or she will never change their position because they are trying to win elections and popularity. But you go to the grassroots and you try to influence the society with the right information. What I did, I can tell you, I don't know whether I will fully answer your question, Ambassador, is that I put messages in Europe in MTV and in the German Viva, which is the German version of MTV, and about refugees and asylum seekers, so people understand very well, because I know young people were watching, and one has to educate people from the beginning. I used football players as goodwill ambassadors. We have Ronaldo in Europe, and so because I know that there's a lot of extremist people, sort of people with this extremist ideology in mind involved in watching footballs and everything. So I think slowly I try to influence at the grassroots level. In UNHCR, we try to have training programs at different levels with the police, with the military, at the university, so people understand who's a refugee, who's not a refugee. So one cannot just get too much influenced by the wrong leaders about what they are by preaching. That is the only way to do it. Your country is an extraordinary example for many reasons. I dealt with South Africa at different stage in my career. I was in West Africa when South African refugees were there. I know from Cameroon, they were in Cameroon, they were in Congo, they were in, I dealt with your leadership in exile. I was there to organize the repatriation of South African refugees to go back. I could not even do much because they just went back themselves, you see, a lot of them. So I've been involved a lot. I met with your leadership at the highest level together with Mr. Guterres, and we have enormous respect for South Africa, what it represents as an example for the rest of Africa to follow with your generosity of keeping the borders open despite the difficulties you have. One last point is that when I talk about reconciliation, truth and reconciliation, look, it started from your leader, Mr. Mandela, who had very quickly said, we have to turn the page and go forward. And this is what I have been saying in many other conflicts, to please go through it. Somebody will pay the price one day, whether it's the Pope, whether it's the Secretary General, whether it's the International Court of Justice, but we have to turn the page and go on, you see. So I think we have an enormous amount of respect for your country and what you represent. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, yeah, you have a question, sir? No? Okay.
Thank you for coming here and thank you for your time. My name is Abbas Ismail. I'm from Germany, and now to blow the wind to Middle East, because I'm a big fan of Middle East because my parents are from there. So we were talking about diplomacy is failing. So my question is, the war between Saudi Arabia and Yemen is going on since, I would say, 4 years, 4.5 years, but we're not seeing any diplomatic progress over there. So I would like to know why, or what do you think about the war still going on, and still, I mean, it's still the same since 4 years.
Sure, thank you very much. You see, I think there has been a back and forth, obviously. It's a very complex situation. Yemen was one of the countries I was responsible for. I was there quite often and met with many of the people in the leadership right now. The vice president is still there, who I knew. I think there has been some progress. It goes back and forward. I think the UN Special Representative in Yemen had reached some understanding to go forward. There was ceasefire recently. The port was open to ensure supplies coming in. And I think that we need to, you see, in conflicts like this, this is a very good example of this complexity of the situation in this world that we are dealing with. But if we have a small opening, we need to build with it. That is the only way we can do it. And it is very, very difficult for the international community, for the humanitarian community. ICRC lost staff in Yemen. Some were killed, some are not even been found, and other international organizations. Yet, we are not giving in. Yet, we are still engaged. UNHCR is an office, the UN is an office, because the reason, and I was telling the journalist, I don't know whether he's here, this morning, he said, what motivates you to go on, and why are you so optimistic? Look, I'm not an idealistic, I'm optimistic because I saw the people in the ground. I saw the women and children who are waiting for the UN to deliver, the international community to deliver. They're waiting to go home, they're waiting to leave the camps. And after seeing that and coming back home, I cannot rest. I have to work on that. You see, the same in countries like Yemen, or it can be in Syria, or in Iraq, or in other parts of the world. What all of us humanitarians, what we go through it, we cannot give up like that, you see. And that's why I think that's what motivates us, because people are waiting. I remember in one of the countries, a woman took my hand and she said, I'm not letting go his hand until he tell me, why am I not going home? So then they said in Arabic to her, look, they try to explain. So, so these kind of things I will never forget. And my colleagues and my staff that I know working around the world, and that motivates us. That's why I think that with a small opening that we have in Yemen right now, I think there is some progress made. We have to go on and ensure that, inshallah, there would be a solution. Even a solution could be a ceasefire, good enough to allow for return of people, normality of life, provisions of basic needs, human rights for children, because the WFP reports about the situation of the children in Yemen and others. So I remain quite optimistic about it, and I like to conclude with that word. And again, I want to thank you all for listening to me and to my two distinguished colleagues here, and thank you again for inviting me to this beautiful house of God. And I feel very inspired to speak here because I'm in a house of God. And thank you very much for that. And ma salama. Thank you very much.